My topic is introduction to the legislation of all the countries that we will be debating later. The prohibition of torture is one of the customary law. However, it's also part of many international law and international conventions, international treaties, not just human rights, but also humanitarian law. As you can see, the Geneva Conventions and many articles of the Geneva Conventions deal and mention the prohibition of torture. However, not just Geneva Conventions, but also the Hague Conventions enhance the prohibition of torture. Furthermore, as the leading, the basic human rights convention, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and its Article 5 stipulates the prohibition of torture. If we move further to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and Article 7, also not just the international, but also the regional human rights protection, the American human rights protection is mentioning and is stipulating the prohibition of torture in the American Convention on Human Rights as well as the Inter-American Convention to Prevent and Punish Torture. However, maybe the most known example and most proper example, which we have to mention, is the United Nations Convention Against Torture, the CAT Convention. It mentions the definition of torture. The definition of torture is slightly different in all of the conventions. You could see that it can lead to many issues. And even in the definition, which is in the CAT Convention, you can furthermore see that there is no distinction between torture, cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. How to make line between each is the work of each European courts or the Inter-American courts of human rights. However, certain elements can be derived from the definition in Article 1 of the CAT Convention, which provides that, first of all, you can see highlighted that severe pain or suffering is necessary in order to fall under the notion of torture, physical or mental. Again, you can see that each court, human rights court, sees this differently. I think in this sense, maybe the European Court of Human Rights goes the furthest, which sees mental suffering as almost as on the high level as physical torture, physical acts. This action has to be perpetrated intentionally, and the relationship between the perpetrator and the victim is the relationship between the person who is deprived of their liberty and the public official or person who is acting on behalf of the public official. So let's move to the core topic, the European law. You can see that European law is not just the law of the EU, but the Council of Europe's law. First, and maybe the most important for us, is the European Convention on Human Rights and its Article 3, which is quite short. You can see that this is somehow showing that there are no exceptions from this right. The prohibition of torture is absolute. There's no derogation from it. And the Council of Europe also stipulates the Committee for the Prevention of Torture by the European Convention for the Prevention of Torture. The issue with this is that the committee, even though goes to the states, to the countries, and provides some kind of check, the decisions of this committee are not binding, and therefore there is no way that the committee by itself, without the help of the Council of Europe, can somehow sanction the state if it sees some violation of Article 3. This is followed by the European Union's Charter of Fundamental Rights, and even the European legislator is openly stating that the Article 4 is following the Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights. You can see that the text is almost similar. From the customary law and from the international treaties and conventions, you could derive some basic characteristics of this prohibition. you can see that the prohibition of torture is protecting the human dignity, the person's physical and mental integrity. You could see that it's one of the natural rights and it's absolute. The prohibition of torture applies to everyone, everywhere, and in every situation. Therefore, there is no derogation from it. Each of the international covenants and conventions which I mentioned have a derogation clause enhanced in the text. However, the derogation clause does not apply to the prohibition of torture. Therefore, it means it's jus cogens. It's on the top of the hierarchy of international norms. And there is a collective guarantee which guarantees that the international society will try to provide sufficient protection of this right. If we move further to the European courts, European framework, which protects prohibition of torture, we have to mention the most interesting and most basic case law of the European Convention of Human Rights. The Jelanovic versus Latvia is the one where the police officers and the representatives of the authority, of the state authority, did some torturous ill treatment acts. And since the case was closed, the government openly stated and acknowledged that yes, there were certain actions, but there are some procedural obstacles and we cannot renew the case. The European Court of Human Rights, however, stipulated that the domestic legal framework cannot be an obstacle when there is a necessary compensation of the victim. If we move further to the case of Gevgen versus Germany, I think it's one of the cases that if you start to deal with the human rights, you come across this case, and it's still the topic to debate. The Gevgen versus Germany was a case concerning a kidnapper who kidnapped a 11-year-old boy. The police get to get the guy, and during the interrogation they were threatening him that if he didn't tell, because they didn't know where is the boy still captured, and that if he didn't tell where is the boy, they will torture him, he will be sent to prison, and he will be many times raped there. And the Gevgen, as the kidnapper, went to the European Court of Human Rights, which stipulated and stated that even this threat can be a violation of Article 3, and the threat of the protection, the level of protection of prohibition of torture has to be so high that not when the life of one boy or one person is at stake, it can be violated, and not even when the nation's life is at stake. The debate is until today whether it's okay or not. We know that certain human rights systems have, for example, the American is seeing this notion way differently. However, it opened the Pandora's box that we can somehow relativize the absolute nature of the prohibition of torture. Just on the remark, it's not a happy end, since even with the threat of torture, they somehow get to know the location of the kidnapped boy, but he wasn't alive. Let's move further to the Aydin versus Turkey case. It was the case in where Kurdish Workers' Party in '84 tried to make some kind of independent Kurdish state in Turkey. The police and the state authorities tried to stop this, and they made several quite extreme interrogations, and they were looking for people who are connected to this political party. Shukran Aydin was a 17-year-old girl who was the victim of these interrogations. The police came regularly to her village. They were interrogating her and her family. And during this interrogation, she was kept in a prison where she was regularly beaten and raped. After she was released, she went many times to the prosecutor and to the police to report this crime. However, they were looking for certain physical signs on their body if it's true. And she had to go to the European Court of Human Rights, where it was proven that even without physical traits, physical evidence on the body, the rape can be understood as violation of 3 because it has deep mental and psychological scars on the victim that will last even maybe further than the physical scars. Let's move to not the best example, not the best advertisement for Slovakia. The case is concerning giving of birth in Prešov. A woman who was Roma origin had certain complications in the hospital, and I think the case is mostly interesting since it proves that vulnerable position is not just prison or police custody, but it can be also vulnerable position of a woman who is in the hospital. And the case, since the case was concerned the situation when she was giving birth, she had certain complications and she was supposed to go to cesarean. And before that, she received some documentation. She thought that it's necessary to sign them. She signed them, and later on, she got to know that it was the certificate for sterilization, and it wasn't necessary to save her or to save the life of the child. Furthermore, she had suffered certain trauma, like the divorce of the husband because she wasn't able to bear a child, or the exclusion from the community, and she went to the European Court of Human Rights where she got certain compensation. The Albert versus Latvia case is interesting because it's presenting somehow of indirect violation of Prohibition 3, which means that the applicant was a woman. She was the wife of a husband who died in a traffic accident. When she received the body, or saw first time after the accident the body of her husband, the body was burnt and his legs were tied. She didn't know why it happened and what happened, and for a month she wasn't aware of the situation, what they did in the forensic center with the body of her late husband. Later on, it was proved that the forensic center took some tissues without the consent of the husband or without the consent of the wife. And in front of the European Court of Human Rights, this proved to be an indirect harm because for months she didn't know what was happening to the body of her husband, and this distress caused the violation of Article 3. Just a short remark to Slovakia, since I'm the only one from the presenters who can just fastly tell you something about the legal framework of prohibition of torture in Slovakia. As I think in all of these countries, the legal framework is the constitution, the criminal code, and the law on the police force. The criminal code, the penal code in Slovakia stipulates the prohibition in Article 420. You can see that the elements of the crime are as the UN CAT Convention. There is again the intention, the purpose, and the causing of severe physical or mental suffering. So you can see that the Slovak legislation is following the international law as it is supposed to. In Slovakia, you can see that the ordinary courts deal with these issues. However, I think almost everywhere, when the question of prohibition of torture pops out, you could see that it's related to the non-refoulement principle, that the person cannot be extradited back to his country because there is supposedly the harm or danger that he will be tortured or he will be the victim of illicit treatment. The first case is from 2018. A woman was captured on the train station in Shahi, and she couldn't prove her identity. So there was the decision of district court, and they were stating that after a certain investigation, she's from Afghanistan and she should be sent to Afghanistan. However, the Supreme Court made in-depth analysis, and it was proved that Afghanistan cannot be understood as a safe country at that time, and I think still until now. And because of that, she cannot be sent back to Afghanistan, and she should be granted some asylum. The Constitutional Court of Slovakia was also dealing with the case. This is a quite current case, and still the complaint under the Prosecutor General's Office Act isn't decided yet. It was dealing with a person who was in prison custody, and he had certain medical issues, and because of that he was demanding clean clothes, to have possibility to shower every day, and some medication. And because of COVID measures, the policemen refused to do so, and they stated that the health measures do not allow for him to get these necessary medication as well as clean clothes, just because that it will be possible reason to spread COVID in the prison. But it's still not decided yet. So let's move to the proposals, which you can see from international law. There are many debatable issues. You can see that the most problematic is that there is no clear-cut definition of the torture. You cannot say what is torture, inhuman and degrading treatment, and what are the differences. Each courts decide differently, and this leads to certain gaps and to ambiguity. As well, you can see that the problem with the prohibition of torture is also, even though it's jus cogens, many countries who are even the member states of the CAT Convention, there are 190 member states, and many those states still use this illicit treatment. I think the quite interesting case is the case of United States of America, even though it presents itself as a democratic human rights protector. You could see that after the 2001 terrorist attacks in the USA, there was open a big debate related to whether use coercive measures when there is a ticking bomb situation, therefore an extraordinary situation, and the life of many people are at stake. So the Gafgen decision is absolutely against. You can see that there are huge differences, that European regional human rights system is way different than the American one. And also the issue is with the USA that even though the CAT Convention was properly ratified, certain articles are not ratified, and if some international body would like to take the situation in front of the case in front of the, let's say, the European Court of Justice, it has no legal framework to do so. Okay, thank you. I'm almost finished. So how to deal with it? I think the first step is to make the domestic legal system so strong in each of our countries so that this practice will be somehow suppressed. The most important is the education of those people who deal with possible victims, with people who are deprived of their liberty, policemen and prison guards. However, as we could see, even hospitals or even schools can be the place where the person is at a very vulnerable position. Method of selecting applicants is also something that should be enhanced, so those who deal with these people who are deprived of their liberty would be selected properly, and for example those people who have traits of aggression wouldn't be selected in these positions. And also maybe the most important is that if these illicit treatments or these acts happen, those people who report, the whistleblowers, would be protected and wouldn't be afraid of certain sanctions or harm. And in this sense, I wrote down the act from Slovakia from 2014, which gives some kind of legal framework for the protection of these whistleblowers. And just as a final remark, you could see that even though that prohibition of torture is jus cogens and should be absolute, there are so many problems and so many gaps that it's still the topic to be debated even today. Thank you.